Alright, what's up y'all? Wooly here. Today we're going to start a new series that is going to cover all of the different roles of this game and how to play them, because while there are a lot of guides out there by avid players, longtime players, even new players that have experienced success, what have you. There's a lot of builds out there and guides that you can take away from with really good information. Whether you're looking for a healer loadout, a tank loadout, a controller loadout, a DPS loadout, based around the different powers that are available in the game. But one thing I really haven't ever come across in my years of playing the game and looking up different videos for whatever they are, just trying to get an idea of how to start a new loadout for a different character, because I've played dozens of characters over the course of my tenure in this game, right? But I haven't seen anything that explains the fundamentals. I'm sure there's a video out there if I look hard enough. There's probably quite a few. But I'm going to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring and try to explain things as best as I can when it comes to the roles and how to play them, because we do continuously get influxes of new players whenever there is a new event. And usually with these events, like the House of Legends that came out last year, there is going to be what's called a CR skip, or a combat rating skip. So we get a lot of new players that are running around playing these support roles and don't necessarily know how to play those support roles, right? So we are going to talk about the fundamentals of learning how to play your support role. That's basically what this series is going to be. So we are going to save DPS for last, because that is probably the most common role in the game. And there is ways to do it wrong and ways to do it right. So we will kind of cover everything regarding these powers. So we're not going to cover every single power. We are specifically going to cover the roles and how to play those powers. And depending on what role you are, whether it's DPS or your support role, and a support role would be anything other than a DPS. So a support role would be a troll, which is actually a crowd control, a tank, or a healer. That is pretty much it. You have four main roles, the three main support roles, and then DPS. DPS is always going to be a secondary role. It stands for damage per second. And it does exactly what it says. So let's go ahead and jump into the tank aspect of it. Now you can see in the top left hand corner there is a little shield icon behind my level. That indicates that I am in tank role. So what is a tank? How do you play a tank? That is really going to depend on what type of power you choose, because there are different tanks in the game. We'll start with the basics. The primary function of a tank is to be the man on the front line. Without a tank, there is no raid. Essentially, no matter how you do it, the tank's job is to basically control the raid. By that I mean your job is to hold the aggro of the boss, the mini bosses, the ads. You're there to take the brunt of the damage and aggression. That is what aggro is. That is the aggression from the boss and the enemies in the raid. So your job is to specifically take that. Now, depending on what kind of tank you're going to play, because there are different powers that have the tank role and they function slightly different. So for instance, mine is a fire-based character. So fire is very much a health pool power, I guess you can say. So we'll take a look at the stats. So essentially for fire tanking, health is going to be your primary stat that you want to focus on. So you can always check it in your stats tab. Dominance would be secondary. So you don't need restoration, which would be healing. You're going to get plenty of that based off of the actual gear and the artifacts, and depending on how you spec your character's skill points, or stat points as they're now called. But understanding that dominance is an important factor for any tank, because dominance is going to determine how strong your aggression meter, I guess you can say, is the easiest way I can explain it. It's going to be the determining factor of how strong your taunt is, and that's what you do. You want to taunt the bosses, and you want to pull their aggro. You want to keep them on you and off of the rest of the group. Okay. We'll cover some of the other mechanics later in future videos about how they, depending on certain raids, there are bosses that will instantly drop aggro and turn towards the group. So that's for another topic. We just want to talk about the fundamentals. So the best thing to do when you are starting your tank role is to go in here and look at the powers. By all means, I absolutely recommend reading up on it or looking up a video on YouTube specific to that power from somebody who has been playing that specific role on that specific power, and will give you some very good tips for a loadout, what kind of artifacts you should have, how you should spec your character, and then I always recommend double checking that to make sure that you're spec the right way. You can ask players in the game if you have friends, if you run into a character or somebody in game who plays that power, you can ask them as well, or just check a few videos, and you can always read the comments in those videos to kind of understand if you're being told the correct information. But the best thing to do as far as creating your loadout is read the powers, because some of these will be specific to the damage side, some of these will be specific to the tank side or the support side. So when you're rolling over the information here, you'll see that the power interactions tell me it burns enemies, making them vulnerable to burning effects, but it will also specify the tank roll. What does it do? It greatly increases shield value. However, shield absorbs 35% damage taken. Okay, so that sounds all good and well, but if you scroll over here and you look at, let's say, Stoke Flames, this will tell you that it decreases the damage dealt, but increases the total healing. So when you look at the description of it, it says conjure restorative flames, healing yourself over time. The intense heat sears nearby enemies, making them or damaging them over time. But this will also strengthen your shield. So, like I said, before we get too carried away on the powers, this is just a little bit of information for you to understand where you want to look. So, essentially, being a tank can be kind of stressful at times. It's not a role for everybody. It's definitely not a role everybody should play. But if you can get into it, you will probably love it as much as I do. And it took me about 10 years to want to play a tank, I'll tell you that much. So, like I said, it's not for everybody. Let's go back and look at the stats, right? So, well, first let's take a look at the gear here. So you always want to find gear specific to your role. Now, if you look at the top, scroll down, and see where it says requires role. I wish I had a cursor so I can highlight it, but where it says requires role tank, okay? So it would be the same for healer or controller. It would say requires role. Now, if that is blank, that means it is for DPS. So we'll just look at this one for example. It has no required role, it just has a required level. So no required role, meaning it is DPS, damage per second. But when we look at the tank, the main stats that you want to pay attention to are going to be your health and your dominance. That is really it. You can see the restoration is even with dominance on the stats there. They're both 3517. Whereas the health is 19,348. Now the reason we want high health is so that we can take a hit. Because you are going to get hit harder than anybody else in the raid when you are the tank. Which is why you're there. So you want to be able to keep an eye when you're in a raid on what's going on around you. So you want to zoom your camera out like that and always face it towards your team. That way, let's say the group is standing over here, I may be standing over here tanking a boss, and you always want to pull the boss away from the group. This way I can keep an eye on them, because every few minutes, well, every couple of minutes, when you get into a new, let's say we're in a boss fight, right? You're going to have different sections of that boss fight. Whenever you burn their health to a certain point, what's called a mechanic for that raid will kick in, and it's a mechanic for that boss fight. Usually this is accompanied by some kind of task that the group needs to complete. It's a very quick task usually, like just grabbing something that is highlighted and says that you need to stand there and hold a button. But regardless of the mechanic, there are going to be ads, which are the enemies, the small enemies that you encounter. Trash mobs, as they're called. Those are going to come out. And as a tank, your job is to maintain the boss, but also grab those ads. Because when you go, if you just stand there, those ads are going to go straight for the rest of your team. And ads in the raid will always hit harder than ads in any other instance that you run. They hit very, very hard, and they can do a lot of damage very quickly. And often, believe it or not, ads are the one that will do the most damage to the tank. Yes, the bosses hit hard, and they usually have a couple of different moves in their repertoire, so to speak. That will be considered a one-shot mechanic, or a group wipe, if you will. They will have a couple of specific moves like that that will do the most damage to the tank. But as in terms of just being shredded, the ads are the ones to watch out for, because they are the ones that will destroy the tank if you're not careful. So, depending on the type of power that you've chosen, there's going to be different ways to play the tank role. Earth, for example, is a high defense damage mitigation, meaning you're dampening the damage, you're weakening it. That's what mitigate means in this context. Rage is, when you get used to it, rage is pretty easy to tank with. It's probably one of the easiest to tank with. And rage is also a health pool, but a self-healing. This kind of like fire, but not exactly. The way rage works is that you take in all the damage, and you use a certain power to heal yourself back. So based on the amount of damage that you're taking, you're going to get a percentage of that health healed back. And as long as you keep your hit counter up, so if you're just doing this, or just hitting the power, continuously hitting something, and your hit counter goes up, and we'll go to the sparring target so you can see what I mean. But as long as you keep your hit counter going, and you'll see it on the side of your screen, your health will continue to stay buffed, your health will continue to stay up. And that is how you tank with rage. So there you go. As long as my hit counter keeps going, I am going to keep buffing my health. After a few seconds, your health will shoot back up as long as you hit the right mechanic. So we're not going to go into full detail on that here. That's just a brief explanation of rage, overly simplified. So Earth is a damage mitigation. Rage is self-healing based on the amount of damage that you've taken in is what you heal out. Fire is also self-healing, but fire is not based on the amount of damage that you take in, which is why we want our health as high as possible. It's based on what you can heal out specifically. So you can mitigate your damage with shields. So there's immolation like we talked about. We have a hard light shield. We have burning determination, which is not specifically a shield per se. It is, but it isn't. It basically it reads like it works the same way as rage, but it doesn't. It will heal you whenever you take a hit, basically, and it does that up to 10 hits. Okay. And then Stoke Flames is just a way to strengthen your shield, but also increase your overall healing. So those are the fundamentals of being a tank and understanding the difference between the powers. And Atomic, I've actually never played Atomic, so I can't really speak to how it plays. I've just never wanted to try it. There's not really many Atomic tanks out there that I see nowadays. You still see them. But essentially, when you start reading the powers, you will kind of understand how they will interact when you're in battle and when you're in a fight. Alright, so that is the basics of tanking. You need to be the man up front. You need to control the raid, not sit there and tell everybody what to do, but you need to understand that it's more or less your job to hold the boss and hold aggro, hold that aggression. That's all the tank really needs to do. Oh, I forgot about ice. Ice is another tank power. That one is just heavy on the defense. You have a lot of shields that you can use at your disposal. So essentially you would just cycle through your shields. Like I would cycle through my fire. So I would cycle through one shield and you can watch the cooldown come off. And then I would cycle through the next one. And whenever it breaks or it just gets knocked out, you would go ahead and pop the next one. So learning how to play is really going to be dependent on you when you actually start using the power and you get into these raids. I always recommend practicing in the 4-mana works before you start jumping into the raid, especially the high-end raids. So the high-end raids are a lot more difficult when it comes to some of the mechanics as far as how they interact. They've really been designed around things like artifacts, and you can definitely tell the difference between the older raids from when this game first came out years ago to the newer raids and how they play. You can see how artifacts affect those old raids, and how the mechanics and the raids in these newer later episodes are kind of based around that to account for things like artifacts. Okay, so that is basically what a tank does. Again, it's very, very simple. You are the person that will take the brunt of the damage, but you need to be mindful of your surroundings. You need to be mindful of where the boss is, make sure they stay as close to you as possible, and you need to be mindful of watching for the ads or the trash mobs. Now, one of the main staples of any tank is going to be a pull, so let's take a look at it. This one says, I will enkindle my target with nearby enemies, causing a small explosion at their feet, damaging and pushing them towards me. So essentially, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a pull. There you go. So let's say I'm standing right here. My group is over here. Let's say I'm on the boss. He's right here on me. And this ad comes out from, that left side, and he starts running towards my group. I happen to see him. I am gonna move over, grab him, pull him over to me, and then I will hit my second pull to pull him in. And I will keep doing that. And there are certain little consumables. You can see my utility belt there in the bottom right corner that you can use. Now let's go ahead and take a look at those. This is a personal dampening field. What is that? Let's read it and then I'll explain it. Personal dampening field, Dark Knights. Dark Knights is the current episode or expansion or DLC, if you will. Depending on what you choose to call it, it's the same thing. So every episode you will get certain plans that I don't think I have any in here. Anyways, you will get certain plans. They look like a little blue page that will have the things that you need. You have to craft these, or you can buy them from the broker. But essentially, this says it provides protection from enemy attacks for a short time. So it is a real lifesaver to have in some of those scarier scenarios. And there you go. It's just an extra shield. It's good for any tank power, regardless of the power, regardless of how you play. It's just a good item to have on hand. One of the other ones is another consumable called a chronomatic emitter. And what does this do? This destabilizes enemies, making them vulnerable to time dilation effects. So essentially it stuns. You can see damages and freezes nearby enemies in time with chronometric distortion. So this is based off of the quantum power set, but it's just a consumable that you can craft or create at a workstation. And this holds ads. Now I love these. You can burn through them very, very quickly if you're not careful. So every time you go to craft one, they come in a stack of 96, I think, for every one time you craft. That sounds like a lot, but you will go through these like butter, I promise you. So here's what they do. And that ad is stun. So that is perfect for pulling them in, positioning them in the line of sight of the group. So if my group is here, I'm standing here, I pull this ad, I pull him over, I stun him, the DPSs can go to work. And if they're not hitting the ads like they should be, that's okay. You can take those ads and you can pull them right in front of the boss and make sure that work gets put in. But that's neither here nor there. That's just an example. So the pull is one of the main ways that you will maintain your aggression. Okay? And then I will kind of dial this into more simplistic terms. So you want to pull and you want to buff yourself. How you buff yourself will depend on the power that you play. So you want to pull. You want to continuously pull every couple of seconds, every 6 seconds. Learn how your power interacts. Learn how to cycle through your loadout. Those are things you will learn as you continue playing. And every day you will get a little bit better at it. Until one day it will all just click and it will all come together and you'll really find your play style. But it takes practice. So the pull is the main thing that you would focus on. Now, fire has two. Mine is engulf. This will pull quite a few enemies. And then backdraft is another pull. You can see it in the description there. This will pull anything in the vicinity that's hit. Dominance is the determining factor as far as the stat that you need that will pull in anything around you, right? So dominance is the control effect. It's the same for controllers. Controllers and tanks um, cycle with dominance as their stat, and that is how you control the ads. That is how you can debuff them, etc., etc. But dominance is what you need. So even though we use health as our main stat, um, we have these things called metagenes or runes, depending on the power set you have. They're the same thing. We go with Dom. I put Dom in here, okay, because I still want to cap as much dominance as I can, even though health is my main stat, because that is just essential. And you can tell when you go into look at the raids or any content that you're running, what the requirement is. So let's take a look at the latest episode. So we can see Dark Knight's the source wall. I want you to see where it says suggested dominance, 29,362. So for your dominance to be considered effective in the raid, it needs to be equal to or greater than 29,362. And the next one up is going to be the elite version, significantly more difficult version with greater rewards. But as you can see, the suggested dominance has gone up, so you need to be better geared for that. This one is in fact 37,711, and then the last one is the same. This is the new Elite Plus. So this will give you an idea of what kind of dominance you need to be an effective tank. So if you're very undergeared, let's say your artifacts, which are going to be one of the biggest benefits to any role, are maxed out, you still need to look at your gear and make sure that your gear and your skill points are spec'd accordingly so that you can have the required dominance to meet that. So we've seen what those stats are. Let's look at mine. Okay, my dominance is 52,507. So I have absolutely no reason to go and spec into it directly. I'm getting enough of it based off of the gear, and I'm getting enough of it by using my metagenes or my runes, which are these little augments here. So I'm getting plenty of it. Each one is 848 dominance when it's maxed out, and these 984. So while those are small numbers, that's still, several thousand worth of dominance to tack on, which puts me greatly over what the requirement is for the raid. So that dominance is also not just a determining factor of how effective your pull and control effects of the field is going to be, but also your survivability. So that is tanking more or less in a long-winded nutshell, but hopefully simple enough that you guys understand what the tank does. So let's go and let's see if we can just go pull a bounty and you can see it in action. Okay, and then I will kind of dial this into more simplistic terms. So you want to pull and you want to buff yourself. How you buff yourself will depend on the power that you play. So you want to pull, you want to continuously pull every couple of seconds, every 6 seconds, learn how your power interacts, learn how to cycle through your loadout. Those are things you will learn as you continue playing, and every day you will get a little bit better at it. Until one day it will all just click and it will all come together and you'll really find your play style, but it takes practice. So the pull is the main thing that you would focus on. Now fire has 2, mine is engulf. This will pull quite a few enemies, and then backdraft is another pull. You can see it in the description there. This will pull anything in the vicinity that's hit. Dominance is the determining factor as far as the stat that you need that will pull in anything around you, right? So dominance is the control effect. It's the same for controllers. Controllers and tanks cycle with dominance as their stat, and that is how you control the ads. That is how you can debuff them, etc., etc. But dominance is what you need. So even though we use health as our main stat, we have these things called metagenes or runes, depending on the power set you have. They're the same thing. We go with Dom. I put Dom in here, okay? Because I still want to cap as much dominance as I can, even though health is my main stat, because that is just essential. And you can tell when you go into look at the raids or any content that you're running, what the requirement is. So let's take a look at the latest episode. So we can see Dark Knight's the source wall. I want you to see where it says suggested dominance. 29,362. So for your dominance to be considered effective in the raid, it needs to be equal to or greater than 29,362. And the next one up is going to be the elite version. Significantly more difficult version with greater rewards. But as you can see, the suggested dominance has gone up, so you need to be better geared for that. This one is in fact 37,711, and then the last one is the same. This is the new Elite Plus. So this will give you an idea of what kind of dominance you need to be an effective tank. So if you're very undergeared, let's say your artifacts, which are going to be one of the biggest benefits to any role, are maxed out, you still need to look at your gear and make sure that your gear and your skill points are spec'd accordingly so that you can have the required dominance to meet that. So we've seen what those stats are. Let's look at mine. Okay, my dominance is 52,507. So I have absolutely no reason to go and spec into it directly. I'm getting enough of it based off of the gear, and I'm getting enough of it by using my metagenes or my runes, which are these little augments here. So I'm getting plenty of it. Each one is 848 dominance when it's maxed out, and these 984. So while those are small numbers, that's still, you know, several thousand worth of dominance to tack on, which puts me greatly over what the requirement is for the raid. So that dominance is also not just a determining factor of how effective your pull and control effects of the field is going to be, but also your survivability. So that is tanking more or less in a long-winded nutshell, but hopefully simple enough that you guys understand what the tank does. So you just want to basically keep yourself from dying. So again, that is strongly dependent on the power set, but a pull and buff yourself, and depending on what kind of power you are, you may need to incorporate blocking, but blocking is not necessary for all tank powers. Some work better than others, okay? But back to the artifacts here, we have Everyman Prototype. Now these three right here are basically the gold standard for any power when it comes to tanking. These are necessary, mostly these two. This is also a very good one to have. Eye of Gemini is another one, but I don't recommend using it for tank unless you're a very confident tank. You have a lot of skill points and you have a very leveled or maxed out Eye of Gemini. Otherwise, I would just go with Everyman prototype. So we'll start at this one here. Now the reason this one right here is good, Manacles of Force. If you read the description, it says capable of blunting the strongest attacks. These manacles put you into an unshakable state for 5 seconds when an attack damages you for at least 30% of your health. So if that boss pops off a one-shot mechanic, this should kick in. It should absorb 50% of incoming damage and reapplies it over the next 5 seconds with a cooldown of 45 seconds in between. When unshakable triggers, the following ability cooldowns are reset. So this is basically going to go on and list the different shields for the different powers. So density gemstone, gemstone shield is going to be earth, immolation is for fire, redirected rage is for rage, and winter ward is for ice. I'm guessing density is for atomic then, but I've never played atomic, but we can see that's where the listing begins, so that is going to be for atomic. So this basically, what does this do? This cools down your shield. So if you go and you look at the description, this has a cooldown of 18 seconds. So when I hit it, I have 18 seconds until the next one or the next time that I can use it. So when Manacles of Force kicks in, this will reset that cooldown, making it available again, or making it available quicker in case I need it again. But learning to cycle through your powers so that you don't die if your shield pops is going to be essential, but it's going to take practice to get into the rhythm of it. Luckily, it's not too difficult. But dominance is also a determining factor of how strong your shields are. So just keep that in mind. Now let's look at the other description here, Mystic Symbols of the Seven for this artifact. And you can see on each of these artifacts, we have a 5% health. This one has 4% restoration, 4% dominance, 3% restoration, 3% dominance. Right now my Everyman is at 177, so it's 5% health, 3% restoration, 3% dominance. But they give you an overall additional buff to your base stats, and these stay with you. Alright? So what does Mystic Symbols of the Seven do? Well, let's look at it. Protection of the Seven, the powers of the symbol embolden the user, granting them the following bonuses. When hit by an enemy, increase defense by 5% for each enemy within 5 yards, for a maximum of 20%. Increased healing received by 10%, so whether you're healing yourself or whether you're getting healed by the healers, you're going to get a 10% increase, which is very significant. Regenerate a small amount of health based on restoration each time you are struck by an enemy. So if you happen to put some of your extra skill points into restoration just a little bit, would not go a lot, it's just an added bonus, but it is not necessary to spec into restoration. Just, preface that. And then Everyman prototype. So let's look at it. Genetic alterations. Cause your skin to harden when your life is threatened, giving you defense equal to a percentage of your max health value when your health gets low. So you get some health range bonuses down below. You can read that. 75 through 51% gain. This one says 2% of max health converted to defense. So I have 538,584 health. Now some of that will be converted into defense. That is a lot. That is a lot of defense. We're already at 174,000. So quite a lot. So those are the basics. These are the artifacts you will need regardless of what power you play. If you're going to play a tank, these are must-haves. There's no question about that. Just get them and make sure that these are what you're using. You could also run Cersei's Mask, but we'll get into artifacts later. For now, these are staples that I strongly recommend. Depending on the power you play, you may want to switch something out, but these two for sure are very necessary that I would recommend going with. And as always, it's going to be your preference when it comes to artifacts, but until you learn what you're doing, until you learn to play your role, I strongly recommend going with the gold standard artifacts. They're sure to keep you alive once you level them up, okay? So, we've covered the basics of what it means to be a tank, and I'm sure this video is incredibly long at this point, so I don't want to keep it running. I just wanted to give the simplest explanation that I could. I don't know if I did a good job of that or not, but I think we covered pretty much everything. There's a lot of different things to know when you get started in the game, so if you're new, it can be all very overwhelming. There's different ways to increase your stats. Once you get your base at level 10, you will get some mods to put into your base. These are generator mods, and they will add, actually let's go over here and look at the vendor. They will add just an additional buff. So here we can actually get plans to create these mods as well, and we would go for dominance. So you can go for dominance or health, really up to you, depending on what you're playing. I would probably go with dom though, especially if you don't have the artifacts or the skill points. For, you know, someone who has played this game for years, I don't have that problem. But if you're just starting out, that could pose a bit of a challenge for you, so it would be best to go ahead and get your augments for dominance as well. There is also different drinks that you can get. These you can buy from the broker. If somebody's nice, they'll just give you some. Or you can get the plans once they drop, and you can start crafting them yourself. And you always want to go for the latest episode, so that way you get the best soda available. So for tanks, it's always going to be bulldozer soda, and you can see on use, this item will apply these effects: 50 or plus 50 to plus 90% of max power, plus 45 to plus 80% of max health, and then an overall increase to your dominance. So it's an 1800 increase in dominance to your character. And you can always couple that with a compound omega, which gives you a 5% buff to all of your stats. So your health, your power, your restoration, your dominance are the main stats that you would want to really focus on, but this one will give you an increase to all of them, right? And it's a 5%, and that is very significant. That's several thousand added numbers on there. So combine that with this, and like I said, this is good for all. This is good for all powers because it benefits everything, and it's also a group. So you can see if you're in a raid, and it tells you it's going to add these effects. It says it's going to add these effects for the group. So anybody in your group, if you're in a raid, is going to get that buff. Whereas these, it is only going to be you. Luckily, these couple with each other, right? So if I go down and look at my current effects, I only have my tank roll active. So let's see what this looks like. I think I just block that person. Alright, so my health is 538,584. Now let's go ahead and pop this omega. Now my health is 553,061. Alright, now let's go ahead and pop this bulldozer. Oh, it's the same. It's the dominance and stuff that changes. Because let me put my trinket back on. I think it's just a buff, but either way, you get an additional stack. The only difference is that if you die while you have these sodas active, the compound omega will not go away. It will stay active for 30 minutes. All sodas will stay active for 30 minutes, I believe. But the green ones, will always go away if you die. Once you revive, that buff is gone. You need to pop it again. Anyway, that's it. That is what I have today for tanking. Like I said, this video has probably gone very long. So to sum it up, tank is the guy on the front line. The pull is your main source of controlling your aggression, or controlling the aggression of the enemies in the area. Then you want to just buff yourself, and depending on the power, how you buff yourself is going to be dependent on what type of tank you play. But the idea is the same across the board. Pull the ads, pull the boss, maintain order in the chaos, right? So that is understanding the tank role. Now, if you have any questions, definitely feel free to drop them down below. I do always try to go back and answer the questions as best I can, whether it's been 1 hour or 6 months. I do check. I do try to always respond. Might take a little bit of time, but I will get back to you. If not, somebody else will get to you in the comments below. That you can be sure of. So if there's anything else that needs to be addressed as far as what is essential to understanding tank role, please feel free to drop that in the comments. If there's anything you think I should have discussed but didn't, because I kind of decided on a whim I was going to start this series, then by all means drop that in the comment section below. So I'm not sure what role we are going to do next, guys, but we are going to continue that trend. We are going to go with healer, and then controller, and then DPS, okay? But we're going to break these up into separate videos so that, as you can see, these videos are probably going to be very long when they come out. I don't know how long I've been recording, but it's been a very long time. So, without further ado, I'm actually going to go play the game now, because I got on to do my dailies, and I thought, hey, it would be cool if I started actually talking about how to do these roles, because I don't think I've seen those videos that discuss the fundamentals. But anyways, guys, if you're new to the channel, I'm sure you're here because you were interested in the game, or you just want to know a little bit more about the power, or you just clicked on it at random, or you're a current player and you're just curious if I'm giving out good information. If you are a returning viewer, as always, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, guys. Give me a like, give me a subscribe, give me a comment. Let's get the discussion going. But I'll catch you next time whenever we drop the next video. Woolly out.